Jake Patch Reynolds stared at the flickering screen of his communicator, feeling a mixture of irritation and disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered under his breath. The message displayed in glowing blue letters was simple, yet baffling. Urgent maintenance request, Eridones V, malfunctioning fountain, priority, high. Patch rubbed his temples. Of all the jobs he could have been called to handle in the galaxy, this one took the cake. He had imagined his future in space as an exciting blend of adventure and discovery, working on cutting-edge starships or uncovering ancient alien tech. Instead, here he was, being called to fix a fountain. Not just any fountain, though. According to the brief attached to the job request, this particular fountain was a relic of the Vicorian Z race, so advanced that their technology had baffled even the brightest minds for centuries. It had been broken for 50,000 years. With a resigned sigh, Patch stuffed his well-worn toolkit into the cargo hold of his ship, the Rust Bucket. It was an ironic name for a spacecraft that looked like it might fall apart at any moment, but Patch had a certain fondness for the old bird. Like him, it was rough around the edges, but reliable when it mattered. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, powering up the engines. As Rust Bucket roared to life and lifted off from the space station, Patch gazed out at the vast expanse of stars, wondering if he'd ever get a call for something that didn't involve fixing plumbing. The journey to Eridones V took only a few hours, but as the planet grew larger on his view screen, a sense of awe crept up on him despite himself. Eridones V was a world of legend, its ancient Vicorian cities now reduced to ruins, scattered across the planet's surface like forgotten relics. Vicorian technology was a thing of marvel, so advanced that even the Confederation's top engineers had never been able to fully understand it. The Vicorians had disappeared mysteriously 50,000 years ago, leaving behind a legacy of wonder, mystery, and broken machines. Patch's descent through the atmosphere was smooth, though the sight of the planet from above took his breath away. Once vibrant and lush, Eridones V had become dry and barren over the millennia. Towering structures of stone and metal jutted up from the ground like the skeletal remains of a forgotten civilization, their surfaces eroded by time and wind. The landing site, marked by the Confederation, was situated in a grand courtyard surrounded by colossal, crumbling statues that seemed to watch Patch with eyes hollowed out by the ages. The fountain, the object of his mission, stood in the center of the courtyard, a massive structure made of shimmering alien crystal, towering 3 stories tall. Its design was intricate and beautiful, the kind of craftsmanship that defied explanation. Even from a distance, Patch could feel a strange energy emanating from it, though it remained dormant and silent. As Patch stepped off his ship, he was greeted by a small team of Confederation officials, all of whom seemed equally perplexed about why he had been called. "You're the mechanic?" a Zervanian diplomat asked, her translucent, glowing skin shimmering in the sunlight. She had a skeptical look on her face, her large, luminous eyes narrowing as she looked him up and down. "That's me," Patch replied, adjusting the strap of his toolkit on his shoulder. "I hear you've got a fountain that's been on the fritz for a few millennia?" The Zervanian arched an eyebrow. "The Vicorian fountain is more than a mere water feature," she said, her voice dripping with irritation. "It's a terraforming mechanism. When it functioned, it could replenish a planet's atmosphere, creating life from nothing. But it's been inactive since before your species even discovered fire." Patch gave her a bemused look. "Well, it's still a machine, right? Machines break down. That's what I'm here for." Before the Zervanian could respond, a Zythan diplomat, a tall, metallic creature with multiple insectoid limbs, clicked his mandibles and spoke. "The greatest minds of the galaxy have tried to repair it," he said, his voice sounding like 2 stones grinding together. "They failed. We do not expect a human to succeed where they could not." Patch chuckled. "I've heard that before." He wasn't one to be intimidated by alien tech. He'd worked on enough different species machines to know that, at their core, everything from warp engines to planetary defense grids operated on similar principles. It was all just a matter of figuring out how. The other officials and dignitaries surrounding the courtyard watched as Patch approached the fountain, their eyes filled with skepticism and curiosity. The structure itself was awe-inspiring, even up close. The crystalline surface of the fountain shimmered in the sunlight, reflecting a spectrum of colors that seemed to shift as he moved. Ancient Vicorian symbols were etched into the base, their meanings long lost to time. Patch pulled out a small multi-tool and began inspecting the base. The Confederation scientists had obviously run every possible scan on it, likely using technologies far beyond his reach, but none of that mattered if no one had bothered to try the simple approach. Sometimes, you just need to get your hands dirty, he thought. To the gathered aliens, the sight of a human mechanic with a wrench poking around an ancient and revered piece of history seemed almost laughable. But Patch had learned a long time ago that high-tech solutions weren't always the answer. Sometimes the oldest, simplest tricks work best. He traced his fingers along the base of the fountain, feeling for hidden panels or latches. The surface was surprisingly smooth, with no obvious points of entry. After a few minutes of inspecting it visually, he pulled out a small diagnostic device from his toolkit and attached it to a crystalline node at the bottom. The device blinked to life and started reading the fountain's energy output or lack thereof. Dead as a doornail, Patch muttered, shaking his head. No power. No wonder this thing's been offline for 50,000 years. He adjusted a few settings on the diagnostic tool, probing deeper into the core of the fountain. What he found surprised him. Beneath layers of dust and decay, there was still some form of energy signature, weak and intermittent, but it was there. Interesting. The sound of footsteps behind him caught Patch's attention. He turned to see the Zervanian diplomat watching him closely. Have you found something? She asked, her skepticism waning slightly. Maybe, Patch replied, rubbing his chin. It looks like there's still some power left in the system, but it's not reaching the main circuits. I'm going to need to open this thing up. Mind if I tinker with it a bit? The diplomat hesitated, exchanging glances with the others. Do what you must, she finally said, though her tone remained doubtful. Patch smirked. Don't worry. I've got a hunch this old machine just needs the right touch. As he began to unfasten a panel near the base of the fountain, Patch couldn't shake the feeling that this job was about to turn into something far bigger than anyone had expected. The Vicorians were gone, their secrets lost to time, but if he could bring this fountain back to life, he might just be about to uncover one of their greatest mysteries. And he had a feeling the galaxy wasn't ready for what was about to happen. Patch wiped the sweat from his brow, the alien sun of Eridones V casting long shadows across the courtyard. The ancient Vicorian fountain loomed above him, towering and magnificent, but its secrets were still locked away. Despite its beauty, it was clear this piece of technology had been dormant for so long that it had become little more than an ancient relic to those who observed it. And yet, there was something about it, something just out of reach, that told Patch it could be brought back to life. Around him, a crowd of alien dignitaries and Confederation scientists watched in a mixture of amusement, curiosity, and disbelief. They whispered among themselves, their expressions ranging from skepticism to outright dismissal. After all, some of the galaxy's brightest minds had tried to solve this puzzle for centuries, and here was a lone human mechanic, tinkering with a fountain that had been dormant for 50,000 years. How does it look? Came the voice of the Zervanian diplomat from behind him. Her eyes glowed faintly in the twilight, the intensity of her skepticism seemingly rising with each passing minute. I assume you've encountered Vicorian technology before? Patch glanced back at her, smirking. Can't say I have, but a machine is a machine. If it was built, it can be fixed. The diplomat crossed her arms. The Vicorian technology is unlike anything your kind has ever seen. It defies conventional understanding. Patch didn't reply immediately, focusing instead on his work. Using a small plasma torch, he carefully removed a sealed panel at the base of the fountain, revealing a labyrinthine network of crystalline conduits, some of which were cracked and worn with time. Inside, there were gears, strange spirals of metal, and circuitry that seemed to pulse faintly with dim, fading light. It was an odd mix of mechanical and organic components, like nothing Patch had ever seen. His eyes narrowed. Huh. Now that's interesting, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. He ran his hand over the intricate lattice of circuits, feeling the faint hum of energy that still coursed through it. The Zythan diplomat clicked his mandibles, his metallic carapace gleaming in the fading sunlight. You think you can solve a puzzle that has baffled our best scientists for generations? I find that hard to believe, human. Patch stood up and stretched, letting out a long breath. He'd heard variations of this sentiment his entire career. As a mechanic, people, especially non-humans, tended to underestimate him. They saw someone who worked with grease and metal, not the refined technology of the Confederation or its most advanced species. But Patch didn't need complex theories or cutting-edge gadgets. He trusted his hands, his instincts, and his understanding of how things worked. I'm not here to impress anyone, Patch said calmly. I'm just here to fix what's broken. The Zythan chittered, clearly unimpressed. You overestimate your species. The Vicorians were beyond the comprehension of even the greatest minds in the galaxy. Their technology is alien? Patch cut in, wiping his hands on his overalls. Yeah, I got that part. But machines break, and when they do, they all follow the same rules. Ignoring the murmurs from the crowd, Patch crouched back down and began probing the exposed circuits with a multimeter. What he found wasn't what he expected. Despite being ancient, the Vicorian technology was still functional at its core. It was as if time had worn away the outer layers, but hadn't fully killed the inner workings. The conduits were designed to carry some form of energy, something that felt oddly similar to plasma, yet entirely foreign. The problem wasn't that the fountain was broken beyond repair, it had simply stopped. The energy it once ran on was either depleted or blocked from flowing to its critical components. It was like a car engine that hadn't been started in millennia, waiting for someone to turn the key. Patch narrowed his eyes as he traced a bundle of energy conduits leading to what looked like an energy distribution hub buried deeper in the fountain's structure. He spotted something there, near the base, a corroded connector, barely holding itself together. Ah, there's your problem, he muttered. It was a small detail, easily overlooked by anyone who assumed Vicorian technology was too advanced for such basic issues. You found something? Asked a Zervanian scientist who had joined the crowd, her voice filled with cautious hope. Patch reached into his toolkit and pulled out a replacement connector from a standard fusion cell. Just a broken power coupling, he said casually, tossing the ancient, corroded part to the side. It's not getting any juice to the main system. That's it, the Zervanian diplomat asked, incredulous. A broken power coupling? We've spent centuries trying to understand the nature of this device, and you're telling me it's something as basic as that? Patch chuckled under his breath. Machines don't care about being ancient. Stuff wears out. You just have to know where to look. He snapped the new coupling into place, adjusting a few settings on his diagnostic tool as he did. But this wasn't like repairing the hull of a freighter or calibrating a warp drive. The complexity of the Vicorian fountain was staggering. Even with his years of experience, Patch knew he was only scratching the surface of understanding how this machine actually worked. Yet, he felt certain that his instincts were right. The fountain didn't need some esoteric, technological miracle to restart. It just needed power. The Zythan diplomat clicked his mandibles again, clearly frustrated. Your arrogance will be your downfall. The Vicorians are gone, Patch said, cutting him off again. But their machines are still here. And machines? They're my specialty. With a final adjustment, Patch stepped back from the fountain. The atmosphere in the courtyard grew tense as the alien dignitaries watched him closely. They clearly weren't convinced that his simple approach could work, but Patch had a feeling that sometimes the simplest solutions were the ones that made the biggest difference. All right, Patch muttered to himself, pressing a button on his diagnostic tool. "Let's see what you've got." There was a deep rumble that resonated from within the fountain, causing the ground beneath his feet to vibrate. The faint, intermittent glow from the crystalline structures suddenly intensified, and the air around them began to hum with energy. The Vicorian symbols etched into the fountain's base began to flicker to life, one by one, casting strange, ethereal light across the courtyard. The dignitaries gasped in disbelief as the energy within the fountain pulsed and surged. The crystalline conduits, once dormant, now shimmered with vibrant, otherworldly colors, as if the fountain itself was waking up from a long slumber. The Zythan diplomat took a step back, his compound eyes wide with shock. This cannot be possible." Patch grinned. "Told you. Just needed a little TLC." The ground shook again, and this time, a column of liquid-like energy burst from the top of the fountain, cascading down in streams of shimmering light. It wasn't water, it was something more primal, something that defied explanation. The energy fell in slow, mesmerizing waves, pooling in the basin below and creating ripples that seemed to warp the very fabric of reality. The entire courtyard was bathed in the glow of the Vicorian energy, and for the first time in millennia, the fountain was alive. Patch stared in awe at the sight before him. He had no idea what kind of power he had just unlocked, but he knew one thing for sure: this was no ordinary fountain. The energy flowing from it felt ancient, powerful, and alive in ways that made his skin tingle. The Zervanian diplomat, speechless, turned to Patch. "How did you?" "It's just a machine," Patch said, though even he wasn't sure if that was entirely true anymore. The hum of the fountain grew louder, its energy growing more intense. The once dead courtyard seemed to be coming back to life. Plants long turned to dust began to sprout again, and the air itself felt cleaner, as though the atmosphere of the planet was starting to heal. The crowd of dignitaries stood frozen in shock, staring at the spectacle before them. Patch, meanwhile, scratched the back of his head, looking both proud and slightly unnerved. "Well," he said with a nervous chuckle, "I guess that'll do it." But even as the fountain roared to life, Patch couldn't shake the feeling that they had just scratched the surface of something far bigger. The Vicorians had vanished, leaving behind their technology and their mysteries. And now, he had just opened the door to a forgotten power that the galaxy hadn't seen in 50,000 years. Whatever came next, he knew it wasn't going to be as simple as fixing a broken machine. The courtyard of the Vicorian ruins was now bathed in a radiant glow, unlike anything anyone had seen in millennia. The shimmering liquid energy flowing from the fountain was mesmerizing, casting iridescent ripples that danced along the ground, reflecting the awestruck expressions of the alien dignitaries. For Patch, it was like watching a miracle unfold, but one that he had unwittingly set in motion with a simple power coupling replacement. He muttered under his breath, eyes wide as the full magnitude of what was happening sank in. This was no ordinary repair job. He had thought it was just another machine, an ancient, albeit alien, device that needed a reboot. But what he had triggered was far beyond anything he'd ever experienced. The fountain's energy cascaded through the air, almost as if alive, its liquid-like substance pulsing with a rhythmic glow. As the fountain roared to life, the surrounding courtyard seemed to respond in kind. The ancient Vicorian symbols etched into the nearby structures began to pulse and glow, casting vibrant patterns of light across the stone. The very ground beneath them thrummed with power, as if the entire planet were stirring from a long slumber. The dignitaries, many of whom had watched Patch with skepticism, now stood frozen in shock and disbelief. "This can't be happening," the Zervanian diplomat whispered, her glowing eyes wide with astonishment. She stepped forward cautiously, her hand outstretched toward the fountain's energy field, but the overwhelming force of it kept her at a distance. "Do you realize what you've done, human?" Patch turned to her, still trying to make sense of the scene. "Yeah. I fixed the fountain," he said, though his voice lacked the usual sarcasm. Even he knew this was far more than that. The Zythan diplomat, his insectoid eyes darting back and forth, stepped closer to the fountain, his mandibles clicking in shock. This is not possible. The Vicorian technology was lost. No one, not even the greatest minds of the Confederation, could figure out how to reactivate this. And now it's alive again? Patch scratched his head, feeling a mix of pride and confusion. Look, I don't know what kind of magic tech these Vicorians were working with, but I didn't do anything fancy. Just fixed the power flow. Whatever this thing is, it was waiting to come back online. But the real revelation wasn't the fountain itself. It was what the fountain's activation was beginning to trigger. As the energy flowed from the top of the structure, it wasn't just limited to the courtyard. The ripple of power extended outward, cascading across the landscape, touching the long-dead soil of Eridones V. In real time, the planet began to change. First, it was subtle. The wind shifted, carrying with it a strange, electric charge. The air, once thin and dry, now felt dense with moisture, as if the atmosphere itself was replenishing. In the distance, where barren desert stretched as far as the eye could see, patches of greenery began to sprout from the ground. Dry riverbeds, cracked and ancient, began to fill with liquid, shimmering like the energy from the fountain. It was as though the planet was waking up, coming back to life after thousands of years of decay. Patch stood there, mouth slightly open, as the realization hit him. This thing isn't just a fountain, he whispered to himself. It's a planetary rejuvenation system. The Zervanian diplomat, who had been staring at the transformation in stunned silence, finally spoke up. The Vicorians. They were able to terraform entire worlds. This fountain, it's their legacy, their gift to this planet. It wasn't just ornamental. It's restoring life, healing the planet's atmosphere. Patch's stomach dropped. He wasn't a scientist, but even he could understand the implications. This wasn't just a piece of machinery. He had, quite literally, restarted a mechanism that was designed to terraform planets. A technology so advanced that no one in the galaxy had been able to replicate it. Until now. The crowd of dignitaries was in a frenzy, trying to understand what they were witnessing. Confederation scientists rushed to analyze the readings from their instruments, their faces filled with disbelief. Data streams flashed across their handheld devices, showing atmospheric changes, energy signatures, and life detection systems all spiking at once. This could change everything, one of the scientists muttered, staring at the readings. The Vicorian technology, it's beyond anything we could have imagined. If this is just one piece of their legacy, what else could we uncover? Patch, feeling a bit out of his depth, watched as the once dry air around him became cooler, more breathable. Plants began to sprout along the edges of the courtyard, vines creeping up the ancient stone structures. A light mist drifted in, the first signs of moisture returning to the planet's atmosphere. He turned to the Zervanian diplomat, who was still fixated on the fountain's energy. So, what happens now? The diplomat tore her gaze from the fountain and stared at Patch, her expression a mixture of awe and caution. What happens now is that the Confederation will send in its top scientists to study this device and everything around it. The implications of this discovery are galaxy-changing. Galaxy-changing, Patch repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. All because of a broken power coupling. Before anyone could respond, a loud rumble echoed from beneath the ground, causing the gathered crowd to gasp. The ground shook slightly, then stabilized. Patch frowned and looked at the base of the fountain. Something was still happening, and it wasn't just the planetary rejuvenation. Suddenly, the Vicorian symbols on the nearby monoliths began to shift, their glowing patterns rearranging themselves into new configurations. The stones themselves seemed to move, revealing pathways that had been hidden for millennia. The entire complex was reacting to the fountain's activation, as if the fountain had been the key to unlocking a much larger system. "What the hell is that?" Patch muttered, stepping back as one of the stone pillars split down the middle, revealing a dark passageway beneath. The Zythan diplomat's eyes widened. The Vicorians. They built more than just this fountain. This entire site, it's a gateway to their deeper secrets. The scientists rushed forward, scanning the newly revealed passages with frantic excitement. Patch watched them, feeling a deep sense of unease. He had come here to fix a broken machine, but now it seemed like he had opened Pandora's box. Whatever secrets the Vicorians had left behind were now being exposed, and Patch couldn't help but wonder if the galaxy was ready for them. The Zervanian diplomat stepped beside him, her glowing eyes still fixed on the passageway. "You've done something incredible today, human. But I fear this is only the beginning." Patch swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. "What's down there?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. The diplomat glanced at him, her expression somber. "The last of the Vicorian technology. Their greatest inventions, their darkest secrets. Everything they left behind when they vanished. We've been looking for it for centuries." Patch exhaled slowly, the magnitude of his actions finally sinking in. "And now we've found it." The wind carried the scent of newly blooming plants across the courtyard as the fountain's energy continued to pour out, reshaping the world around them. But the underground passages, now revealed, loomed with a quiet, unsettling mystery. Whatever the Vicorians. The ground trembled beneath Patch's feet as the hidden passages of the Vicorian ruins continued to open up. Dust and debris shook loose from the ancient stone structures, while the alien crowd surrounding the fountain murmured in awe and fear. The once dormant planet of Eridones V seemed to be waking up all around them, brought back to life by the flow of energy from the fountain. But what lay beneath deep within the heart of the ruins was an enigma even more significant than the planet's rejuvenation. Patch took a deep breath, trying to keep his cool as the tension in the air thickened. The Vicorian symbols, now glowing more intensely than ever, shifted and rearranged themselves in a way that seemed deliberate, purposeful, as if they were trying to convey a message. "What's happening?" Patch asked, his voice low, barely masking his growing unease. The Zervanian diplomat, standing beside him, wore an expression of awe and worry. Her glowing eyes darted from the fountain to the now open passageway beneath the ruins. "The Vicorian technology is responding to the fountain's reactivation. I don't think we're just dealing with a terraforming device anymore. This is much bigger." Patch frowned, glancing at the dark, yawning entrance to the underground. "Bigger how?" Before she could answer, one of the Confederation scientists, a tall, pale man with wide eyes, rushed over to Patch, clutching a handheld scanner. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he read the data. You have no idea what you've just done, do you?" Patch's gut twisted. "I'm starting to get that feeling." The scientist glanced nervously at the entrance to the underground. "This entire site, it's not just a relic. It's a control center. The fountain was a key, but down there is the true heart of the Vicorian technology. It's some kind of command hub, possibly for planetary or even galactic systems." Patch blinked. "Wait, are you saying this place controls more than just this planet?" The scientist nodded, eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. "It's a planetary control system, terraforming, atmospheric regulation, possibly even space-time manipulation. We've only just started scanning it, but the energy readings are off the charts. If we can figure out how it works, it could change everything." Patch stared at him, speechless. This was beyond anything he'd anticipated. He had thought he was fixing a fountain, something simple. Now, it seemed he had reactivated an ancient system that could potentially alter not just a planet, but an entire galaxy. The Vicorians hadn't just built a tool for reshaping worlds, they had built something far more powerful. And whatever it was, it had remained dormant for 50,000 years until now. "I'm not sure this is something we want to mess with," Patch muttered, feeling an instinctual sense of caution rise within him. "I mean, the Vicorians vanished for a reason, right? What if reactivating this thing is what got them into trouble in the first place?" The Zervanian diplomat turned toward him, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. That's exactly what concerns me. We have no idea why they disappeared, but whatever lies beneath this planet might hold the answer. If we go down there, we could unlock knowledge beyond our understanding, or we could unleash something dangerous. As she spoke, a low, rumbling hum echoed from deep within the open passageway. It was faint but unmistakable, like the growl of some ancient beast stirring from a long slumber. The Confederation scientists exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to proceed or retreat. "Patch," called out one of the officials, a human woman who had been leading the Confederation team. "We need you to come with us. If there's anyone who can figure out how this system works, it's you." Patch hesitated, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had never signed up for this. He was just a mechanic, a guy who fixed things. And now they were asking him to dive headfirst into the heart of an ancient alien control system that could potentially reshape entire worlds? It felt surreal. Part of him wanted to get back on his ship, the Rust Bucket, and leave this whole mess behind. But something about the fountain, the way it had come to life under his hands, called to him. He had touched something greater than himself, something ancient and powerful. And as much as he wanted to walk away, he couldn't. Not now. With a deep sigh, he nodded. "All right," he said, gripping the strap of his toolkit. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The group descended into the dark passageway, the Vicorian symbols glowing brighter as they moved deeper underground. The air grew cooler, filled with the scent of ancient stone and something else, something metallic, faint but present. The walls of the tunnel were etched with more of the strange symbols, all of them pulsing with faint light, as if guiding them deeper into the heart of the ruins. After several minutes, they reached a vast chamber that opened up before them, and what they saw took Patch's breath away. In the center of the chamber stood an enormous structure like a massive crystalline control panel, surrounded by glowing nodes and conduits that stretched across the ceiling and walls like veins. The sheer scale of the technology was mind-boggling, far beyond anything the Confederation had ever seen. It was as if the entire room were a living machine, pulsating with dormant energy. The scientists immediately began scanning, their devices lighting up with unreadable data. One of them looked up at Patch with wide eyes. This is the core of the system. It's a planetary control interface. But look at these energy signatures, they're connected to something much larger." Patch walked toward the crystalline control panel, feeling a strange pull, as if the system was calling to him. His hand hovered over the controls, hesitating. There was a series of Vicorian symbols etched into the surface, glowing faintly. They seemed familiar now, almost as if they were guiding him toward something. "Be careful," the Zervanian diplomat warned, her voice echoing through the chamber. "We don't know what activating this system will do." Patch nodded but couldn't stop himself. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the symbols. Instantly, the room came alive. The glowing nodes pulsed with renewed energy, and the chamber hummed with power. The control panel lit up, displaying a vast, intricate map of the planet. No, not just the planet. It was a map of the entire star system. And beyond that, faint lines connecting to other systems, stretching across the galaxy. A sense of awe and dread washed over him. "This is bigger than I thought," Patch whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the machine. The map shifted, zooming in on a particular point in the galaxy. The Vicorian symbols rearranged themselves, and suddenly, a new image appeared, an image of another world, bathed in darkness, its surface cracked and broken. The Zervanian diplomat's eyes widened in horror. That's Vacker," she whispered. "Their homeworld. But it was destroyed. Thousands of years ago." Patch stared at the image, realizing the significance. This system wasn't just a control panel for terraforming planets. It was connected to the fate of the Vicorians themselves. Whatever had caused their disappearance, it was tied to this technology. They had left behind a tool with unimaginable power, a tool that could both create and destroy. The room suddenly darkened, and a voice calm, deep, and ancient echoed through the chamber, speaking in the long-lost language of the Vokorians. The translation module on Patch's wrist flickered as it struggled to keep up. Reactivation complete. Vokorian Command Nexus operational. Warning, final protocol initiated. The word sent a chill down Patch's spine. Final protocol? What had he just awakened? Before anyone could react, the chamber began to shake violently, and a massive energy surge rippled through the control panel, lighting up the entire system. Patch stumbled back, heart racing. The scientists screamed, their devices sparking with energy overloads. "We need to leave." "Now," one of the scientists shouted. But it was too late. The Vokorian system had fully awakened, and with it, the mystery of their disappearance. The final protocol had been triggered, and whatever that meant, Patch knew one thing for certain: the galaxy was about to change in ways no one could predict. As the energy continued to surge, Patch grabbed his toolkit and ran, the Zervanian diplomat and the others close behind. The ground shook beneath them as they scrambled out of the chamber and back toward the surface. Above them, the fountain continued to flow, but now its once beautiful energy had taken on a more ominous hue. The Vokorian technology, reactivated after millennia of dormancy, was no longer just a forgotten relic. It was awake. And it had a plan of its own.